The Catholic Morning Show.
Deacon Mark Campbell, grateful to be with you here this morning and welcoming back into the Iowa Catholic Radio studio, Patrick Novacosky. How are you, Patrick?
Deacon, good to be with you again.
Well, we had such a great conversation last time you joined us, and we talked about your book that is upcoming this fall on the relationship or the connection between St. Pope John Paul II and Saint Mother Teresa. I wanted to bring you back in and talk about the book that you already have published, and the book that you wrote, the 100 Ways in which St. Pope John Paul II changed the world. And I liked I heard a recent presentation from you where you started out with 10 and then you expanded it to 100. And why did you stop at 100? Because there's probably more than 100 ways that he changed the world.
Well, I really wrote the book to commemorate his 100th birthday in 2020.
Oh, perfect.
So the book is 6 years old, but still selling like it did the first year out. People are fascinated with this Pope still. And I always tell the young people, we can't memory hold John Paul II. Right. He's too important. He left us too much. I really believe we'll be talking about him till the end of time. But so I did start with this top 10. I kind of counted them down David Letterman style without the funny pet tricks or the Velcro wall, if people that are old enough to remember that.
Yep.
David Letterman on Late Show used to count down, do these silly countdowns. Well, this is not a silly countdown. This is a serious countdown of, I think, one of the most influential popes of the last 1,000 years and the great legacy that he left us. So I weaned it down to 10, started giving talks about that. And then in 2018, I realized that in 2020, this great Pope would have been 100 years old.
And you probably have a little extra time in your hands to write during 2020.
Yeah. So I wrote it mostly during 2019, and I recognize that I still have a list of titles that I want to write, stories that I want to write, both fiction and nonfiction, and I had to pick one. And when I realized that 2020 was his 100th birthday, I was like, oh, this is easy. And then I started talking to Catholic publishers. I know many of them. And our Sunday Visitor was the only one that could get it out in time for his 100th birthday, which was May of 2020. And so we worked together, and I worked with several other Catholic scholars to come up with 100 ways. I actually had a list of about 135, and I had to kind of pick some of those out and consolidate them into this the 100 ways. So the top 90 aren't necessarily in order of importance. The top 10 are, but the top 90 kind of flow, like they connect together. Mm-hmm. Like I talk about his friendship with Mother Teresa. That's one of them that actually developed into this newer book. But then we would talk about his friendship with Cardinal Ratzinger. And those two kind of fit together because it's friendship with two holy people. And they kind of wove these top 90 together in a way that just made sense and flowed well.
One of the things that in the presentation that I heard from you recently, I think it left a lot of people in conversation about afterwards, is this thought that when Pope John Paul II came to Iowa back in 1979. Not only was that historic for his visit, but one of the things that people had not realized is that really prior to Pope John Paul II, popes didn't really travel. Yeah. Talk about that a little bit and how he sort of opened this doorway up to where now it seems like that's almost a regular topic of conversation in the Catholic world is where's the Pope visiting, this month, or where is he embarking on a trip to for the first time to meet his flock in that part of the world. Talk about this doorway to travel that's sort of, it sounds like Pope John Paul II sort of ushered in.
He was revolutionary in so many ways, and this is just one of them. But most popes didn't leave the Vatican. And others that left the Vatican rarely left Italy. And it's only in the modern era that popes even traveled outside of their region. So Paul VI came to the United States in 1965. He visited the UN. He visited New York City, went to St. Patrick's Cathedral, and then he went home. And that was astounding, the first pope ever to visit the United States. Of course, his successor, John Paul I, only had 33 days, not much time to do very much of anything, even though we could talk about this in a different show. John Paul I, the ways that he changed the world in those 33 days, were astounding, the things that he changed. But John Paul II, at heart, was a philosopher and a theologian, secondly, but his great initiative was the new evangelization. He was 58 years old when he was elected, still young, vigorous, athletic, and he really wanted to bring Jesus to the world. So when Joe Hayes, Iowa farmer, found out that the Pope was coming to America in the summer of 1979, he wrote John Paul II a beautiful letter on his kitchen table and invited him to Living History Farms in Urbandale outside of Des Moines.
Just down the road from the Iowa Catholic Radio studios here, I just want to point out. And I think many of our listeners and followers of Iowa Catholic Radio are very familiar with this story, but I think it's one of those things that can kind of be taken for granted a little bit, Patrick, because
absolutely.
You got a chance to visit the site.
I visited there, yes, during my trip here to Des Moines. So Joe Hayes really was ahead of his time, in a sense, in inviting the Pope to come to a farm in Iowa. I said in my talk that you are more likely to be visited by an alien from outer space than the Pope from Rome in October of 1979. Yeah. Popes just didn't do that. They just didn't travel and show up at a farm in Iowa. But this Pope did, and he drew 350,000 people, still the biggest gathering in the history of the state. And it's something that we have to remember. This was the beginning of papal travel. John Paul's first papal visit to the United States. He had visited in 1967 and 1976. Yeah, it was 67 and 76. He came to the United States as Cardinal Wojtyła. But when he came to Des Moines, he lauded farmers for their work, their toil, and how they feed people beyond their own families. I mean, they're providing nourishment and food for thousands and thousands of people, and how valuable that is to the world. That he really held up farming and the dignity of the work that they do as being very laudable.
Yes, and you talk about the way he elevated the dignity of the human person and how that complemented Saint Mother Teresa as well. As you broke it down to this top 10 of things, maybe we could explore in further conversations. Maybe break down those top 10, but maybe let's focus on those other 90. What other ones were kind of encroaching on that top 10? Maybe hard decisions to leave on the outskirts. Just give us a little sampling of one or two of those that stand out in that top 90, and then we'll maybe revisit the top 10 at a later time.
Well, you're testing my memory. The book's 6 years old, and I really haven't.
But you've been talking about it ever since.
Yeah, I have been talking about it. Yeah, I do have the top 10 almost memorized to a point where I could just go on about them. One of his passions was to visit China and to visit Russia. When Mikhail Gorbachev visited the Vatican in the late 80s, Mikhail Gorbachev actually invited John Paul to come to Russia. And John Paul said, if it was permitted, I would come. But here's the head of the government inviting him. What John Paul meant was that if the head of the patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church would allow it, that he would go. But of course, a lot of history here between the Catholic Church and the Russian Orthodox Church. And so he had a great outreach to the people of Russia and the people of China. When he would go to neighboring countries around China, he would broadcast messages from their radio into China. He really had a heart for the oppressed peoples of those countries in particular. And those are some of the top 90, the first 90.
When you talk about with Pope John Paul II, his ability to authentically just meet people where they were at, right? Yeah. And there was nobody that was sort of outside of his sphere. I know you talked about him not being able to go to Russia, but this idea of Russia coming to him is, I can't be really understated. Like, it's just such a pivotal moment in that relationship, as you said, between the church and the world, so to speak, a world power.
And there is also with Mother Teresa. He said to Mother Teresa, "You can go places I can't." She could go to Russia, and she did. She went to Moscow. She started her Missionaries of Charity had a home in Russia, in Moscow, and so he had tasks for her to do that he asked her to do while she was in these countries, and they really worked together well.
It's amazing.
Really worked together well.
Just amazing.
And actually, his friendship with Mother Teresa is one of the 90, not the top.
Didn't
10.
make the top 10.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have to explore that in another conversation, or maybe multiple conversations.
Absolutely.
Because I think, as you said at the outset, I think there is so much to know and appreciate that it's probably evergreen and timeless information that, again, as we try to walk our own path of holiness, draw upon the inspiration and the holiness of those who have gone before us, so that, again, hopefully we can have maybe not the same impact in the global world, but that same sort of impact in our own world, our own sphere of influence and whatnot.
Yeah, 100%.
Patrick, thanks so much again for joining us and sharing some of your knowledge and your wisdom experience in this wonderful life of a great saint. We'll do it some more.
All right. Thank you, Deacon.
Thank you.
Listen to the Catholic Morning Show weekdays at 7 a.m. Central on the Iowa Catholic Radio Network, iowacatholicradio.com, or the Iowa Catholic Radio app.